Welcome to episode number 30 of Bonding and Beer. This is your host, Rolando Nunez, and today we're going to talk about trends in dental composites. Let's freaking go. Let's go. What has Rolando been up to? Well, we have been quite busy here at Bisco because by the time you guys listen to this episode of the podcast, we would have launched already Quantium, which is our newest composite, newest member of our catalog. We're super excited, beautiful, and great things to come with this product. It's absolutely fantastic. And we can talk about it a little more later on. We're going to be promoting it, and it's going to be just a beautiful ride, a great ride, okay? One story that I remember about talking about composites, this is way back in 2014. I was in Russia giving a presentation about dental composites and about the trends that were going on back then. And I was lecturing in this auditorium in a university in Moscow, and this auditorium went up from the stage, right? So there are like 300 people in the sitting there listening to the presentation. And when I was done, there was this professor, and a professor of age. You know, she had a cane. She was all the way in the top of the auditorium. And she was talking about how she, graduated from dental school during the communist years of Russia, when it was back the USSR, and how the only thing they did was amalgam and whatnot. And now, you're listening to different types of people coming to Moscow and to Russia to talk about the latest advancements in restorative dentistry. So she had seen it all, and it was quite interesting. She wanted to come down and, shake my hand and whatnot. And I said, let me go up there and meet you over there, because, she had a cane and she had to go down the stairs. So I decided to just go to where she was. And when, I shook her hand, she told me, I'm 82 years old, but if I was 10 years younger, you know what I mean? That would have made her 72. In 2014, I was 44 years old. What are we talking about? This is wild. However, that, I got to tell you, I still got it, man. It doesn't matter. You take all the W's any way they come. That was a big W for me. You know what I'm saying? Listen, if you like, if you comment, and if you subscribe, you can do all three of those together. You can subscribe to our YouTube page. You can go and send us an email at bondingandbeer@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram. And you can also follow us on YouTube, Bonding and Beer. And you can find us in all the different podcast outlets like Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We are there. Okay, so come on, baby. Let's go. Today's topic is current trends in dental composites. And of course, we've been working on developing this new composite for Bisco for the past 9 years. And that's great. The name of the product is called Quantium, and I'm sure that if you follow me on Instagram or Bisco on Instagram or other social media outlets, you will get some information about this product. That's not what we're here to talk about. One of the things that we see in today's composite world are the different trends that companies pretty much push based on feedback from clinicians in order to make their product stand out. So, at some point, there were things like, volumetric shrinkage, wear resistance. These things were important at a certain point. Nowadays, not so much, because most composites have reached a point where their resistance is very good, the volumetric shrinkage is low, so there needs to be other things to make the product stand out. And we're going to talk about those things, right? But even though there are many, what we have now going on is the categorization of dental composites as universal. That's one trend. It's a recent trend, The second thing is shades. That's the second trend. We're going to talk about that. The different shade nomenclatures that are coming out and why, right? And are they as important as they seem? And then, of course, we're going to talk about something that is kind of picking up a little bit, even though we've been doing it for a while, which is warming, warming your composite prior to placement. We're going to talk about all these three things, and then we're going to share some tips about each one of these things, each one of these trends that are going on. But before we do that, my dear friends, let's see what Jeremy, the producer, got us from the beer store. So today's beer is called Pils. It is made by a brewery called Hopewell or Hopwell. I think it's Hopewell, but you never know. It's called Hopewell Brewing Company out of Chicago. So it's a local one, right? This is a Pilsner. This is a Pilsner with an alcohol content of 5.1%, It's a nice alcohol content. And here's the description of the beer by the brewery from their website. Crystal clear, hop-forward Pilsner inspired by the Northern German brewing tradition. Lightly bready malt is met with the floral zip of classic German noble hops, followed by a crispy, clean, drying finish. Now, for the most part, Pilsners are not hoppy. They are not. Every beer has some kind of hop, but they are not hoppy. But these guys are emphasizing a little bit on the hoppiness and the experience of drinking it, along with the finish. The whole description. This is going to be interesting. For those of you who are only listening, this is a tall boy. It's got kind of like, it feels like the letters are from a cowboy poster from the old Western movies. It says Pils. It says superior quality, and it has 5 stars. I don't know who adjudicated these stars, but they got 5 stars in the can. The can is kind of brown. Would you say maroon, Jeremy? Maroon, white letters, and it's got like a little sheriff badge in yellow. Now, here is a fun fact. It says Pilsner is a pale lager that takes its name from the city of Pilsen, Germany, where the first Pilsner was produced in 1842. The term Pilsner literally means from Pilsen. So this is a Pilsner style beer. We're going to crack it open and see what's what. That is the sound of happiness, and no one can deny that. If you are a beer lover, when you hear that sound, something good is about to happen. Now we're going to pour it, okay? Oh, but before that, let's pour it, and then we take a sniff. Now, this is a tall boy, so I decided to use a tall glass to pour this guy over here. I want to do it quite slowly because it's generating a decent amount of foam, a decent amount of head. I am botching this one, Jeremy. This is so bad, it's not even funny. Half of the glass is filled with the foam. This is crazy. Now, no aura for Rolando on this one. 0 aura. But whatever, I don't care. It's a beer. I'm going to enjoy it. So I'm going to sniff it a little bit here. you know, smell yeasty, which I think a lot of beers smell yeasty. It is a clear beer. It's very clear. It's, kind of like a very pale yellow, the color of it. It's clear. The foam is nice, especially after a botched pour. And let's give it a taste.
Sip, 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 sip.
This does not taste like a Pilsner. I am sorry. This tastes different. This actually tastes really good. In my mind, Pilsners tend to they tend to be on the weaker side for, in my opinion, the way I enjoy the beer. Pilsners are, kind of weak taste-wise. They can have high alcohol content, but taste-wise, they're not strong, they're not punchy, they're not super bitter. This guy, it's got some hops. It's got some bitterness. It's got some interesting aftertaste. I can still feel the flavor lingering in my mouth, in the back of the throat. So this is a solid beer, and it's an exceptional Pilsner. They could have fooled me if they serve this and they don't tell me. If they tell me this is a pale ale, hoppy, nice, definitely nice. Thank you, Jeremy. We're going to give it a score at the end of the show. Let's go. We're going to touch on 3 trends. The first one is this thing about composites being universal. They've always been universal. People have used composites for the anterior and the posterior region. And to me, that is basically a universal composite. You can have other added indications, such as, splinting, such as, you can make indirect restorations with them. You can build them up with your hands instead of having them CAD/CAM or whatever. For core buildups. But composites have always been used in the anterior and posterior. Yes, there are clinicians that have composites for their anterior restorations that probably have better polish and a wider shade selection, especially if they're doing stuff like veneers and stuff like direct veneers, right? And then you have other composites that are more, I want to say, packable, a little bit stiffer for the posterior region. So you have different, different features of the composite based upon handling and shade selection and polishability when it comes to the anterior and the posterior region. But these new composites, they've existed for a while. They just have this nomenclature added to their name. Whatever universal composite. And basically is something you can use in the anterior and something you can use in the posterior. Strong enough for the posterior, polishable enough for the anterior, with a wide shade, a wide range of shades in order to achieve high aesthetic results, right? But that's basically what a universal composite is. It's something that it already existed. So it's just a new nomenclature to make it sound a little bit different. But I'll give you an example. When I went to school, we had a composite in our dental school called Herculite XRV, and by Kerr.
Sip, sip, sip.
And Herculite, I don't know if it was the first one, but it was one of the first composites that introduced dentin and enamel shades. And it was so weird because I remember one of my professors opened a kit in front of me because I was going to do a composite. And he said, oh, look, this one has 2 A2 shades, 2 A2 syringes. Well, one was dentin and the other one was enamel. He missed that. I caught it and said, yeah, but you got these 2. And he said, well, just do whatever. So people were not trained at the time. They didn't know. It was just introduced. Dentin and enamel composites of the same shade. And basically the difference was the level of opacity. Enamel composites were definitely more translucent, and body or dentin shades were a little bit more opaque. That is what basically a universal composite is trying to present, right? Something that comes in a body or dentin shade and an enamel shade, with whatever nomenclature the company wants to use, and you can use those materials to restore the anterior or the posterior. That's basically it. So to me, it's just a different name of the same thing. You know what I'm saying? I don't see a true difference between, for example, 3M's Filtech Supreme Universal and Filtech Supreme Ultra. You know, I don't want to say it's the same product with a different label, but I don't think there is much of a difference. It's just the nomenclature presenting a material that can be used both for the anterior and the posterior region. That's the way I see it. Listen, for the most part, all composites can be used in the anterior or posterior region, even if they don't have the universal, they're not part of the universal composite category, or they don't have that as part of their the descriptor or name or whatever the case may be. If you have a composite that's strong enough for the posterior and aesthetic enough for the anterior, that's a universal composite. All right, my guys? Now, your second trend is related to shades. And shades,
Sip, sip, sip.
or shade nomenclature, is where things get a little dicey, okay? Most dentists, if not all dentists, are familiar with the Vita shade nomenclature, right? What is a Vita shade range? And most dentists have had a Vita Classic shade guide in their office. They've used it in dental school, and it's probably the most popular shade guide in the world. Okay? And people, because they are used to it, companies have basically taken that shade guide or that nomenclature and used it in order to develop their composites, hoping that their composites actually match the Vita shade guide, which is not necessarily true for all composites, okay? I remember there is a professor from University of Iowa. His name is Marcus Vargas. And Dr. Vargas, he is a composite nerd. He loves composites. He works a lot with composite. He teaches about composite. And he had a slide with all these different composite discs from different companies, and they were all their A2 enamel version. They were so different. He put that slide in there. They were so different. What is that telling you? Well, my guy, that's telling you that the A2 version of each company is that their A2 version doesn't necessarily match Vita. Because of that, and because of the wide range, when you have, do I need 16 different colors in both enamel and dentin? That creates a lot of inventory. And then all of a sudden you buy like a C1 shade of enamel and the matching body or dentin, and you use it for that one case, and then that composite is going to expire. Pretty sure.
Sip, sip, sip.
So what happened was that there is a need to simplify. And guess what companies did? They came out with simplified version. Now, they went to the extreme. One company in particular, I'm going to call them out here, and I'm going to say it like it is. The company is called Tokuyama, and the composite is called Omnichroma. Omnichroma, they come out and they say, yo, one syringe for everything. Anterior, posterior, A1, A2, A3, A3.5, B2, C4, D7, and whatever in between, you just need one syringe. People like that. Simplicity, convenience, little inventory.
Sip, sip.
They like that. However, as time went by, people started to notice that one syringe is not going to cover all the cases. There are cases where you need to do some masking. There are cases where you need to do some enhancements. But you know what? Even though that happened, and that was some of the feedback, and the people from Tokuyama came out with color blockers and opacers and whatnot, people are still using that product. Why? Because it's easy, it's simple. and it works. It doesn't work perfect, but it works, okay? And in the posterior region, high anesthetics is not of the essence. Unless you're taking pictures to post it on Instagrams, okay? And then you need something perfect. But if you're just working and making a living out of dentistry, and you don't care much about posting on social media, Omnichrome is going to do it for you, for sure. Other companies saw that limitation that Omnichroma introduced, because it is a limitation, by launching their product, and they came out with something called Simplified shade system. Okay, so you got companies like 3M and Kerr coming out with easy shades and simple shade, where you take 3 shades or 5, depending on whatever, and depending on the company, and they're going to give it a different nomenclature. So now, instead of having A1, A2, A3, they have something called light. And light will match A1, A2, A3, B1. And I'm just saying, right? I'm just putting this out there. And then you have medium. And medium will match A3, A3.5, B2, whatever the case may be. And then you have something called warm. And warm will be the A3.5s, the B3s, the C4s, whatever the case may be. But they're trying to basically consolidate as many Vita shades into 3 different presentations using this nomenclature. Is this going to work? It probably should work better than a single shade and a single syringe. But, is it becoming popular? I think Omnichroma is still the most popular simplified shade presentation out there, but these guys are definitely gaining traction. And this is interesting because people want simplified things. People want convenient things. People want hassle-free life. So here's your second road tip regarding this trend. Simplified Vita options will provide more options to fulfill all clinical needs. Even though it might be enticing to go with a simplified shade system, Vita is, you can narrow it down to the most used shades. And we did a survey amongst our clinical research network, and we found out that the most used shades are A1, A2, A3, A3.5, B1. Those were the most used shades by the clinicians that participated in this survey. You get those in body and dentin. Okay, you got 10 syringes, but you're going to be using them pretty much consistently. You don't need the D3s and the C2s and all of that. Okay, you don't need that on an everyday basis. So you can make your own simplified shade system using Vita and purchasing the most popular shades that you use in both enamel and dentin. Maybe get a bleach, as an opaquer, and you're ready to go, my friend. You're ready to go. All right? Trend number 3 is warming. Now,
Sip, 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 sip.
hear me out. People have been warming composites for a long time, from the 90s. They've been using devices. They've been using ways to warm it. They've been using, put it in hot water, put it in the microwave, use one of those like heating pads. People have been doing this for a long time. And the purpose of warming is to reduce the viscosity for a more flowable experience. So if you have a box, interproximal box, and you want to get better adaptation, sure, if you warm up the composite, you can fill it up with a warmed, more flowable composite, and then, you finish up without having to warm anything because you took that warm composite to fill that specific area. This is something that has been done for a while. There are composite warmers out there, okay? Composite warmers that are specifically designed for warming. And I'll give you an example. There's a company called CalSat. They commercialize a wide range of composite warmers for both compules and also for syringes.
Sip, sip, sip.
It's an investment, it's an investment. And then you got the $50 ones that they sell on Amazon, which I am not going to vouch for those, but I will vouch for CalCet. My thesis when I went to grad school at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, making me the first and probably the only Venezuelan redneck on the face of the planet, my thesis was on warming composites and the effect that had on certain physical properties. And one of the things I found is that, yes, you will decrease the composite's viscosity, the material's viscosity, when you warm it to a certain temperature, anywhere between 68 and 71 degrees. Yes, that's a fact. However, not all composites flow the same after they're being warmed, because every formula is different. Okay? You can take a beer, put it in the fridge, make it cold, and then you serve it, and then you drink it. They're not going to taste the same. They're going to taste differently. They're all cold, but they're different. And I hope you like that analogy because it's beer related, and this is bonding and beer. Decreasing the viscosity gives you a more flowable experience. That's great. It also, there is data out there that, warming the composites will have an impact on degree of conversion, on physical properties, blah, 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 blah. All that is fine and dandy. However, what you need to be super concerned about is the cooling rate. And the cooling rate of every composite is different. One thing is when you inject it out of a compule at 70 degrees, and how long does it take for that composite, when it reaches the area that you want to place it in, to cool off and loses that flowability, okay? So there are tips and tricks on how to deal with warm composite. Nowadays, people are warming composites because some people want to use it for veneer cementation. And I think that's interesting. However, not all composites will achieve the proper film thickness even if they're warmed. So you need to make sure that you look for composites that by design are indicated for warming, or, as part of their properties. You can warm it. Not all composites by design have been created in order to be warmed. Warming a composite will help in the flowability of the material to achieve better adaptation in deep boxes of the prep. M-O-D-O. Yes, definitely. Not all composite achieve the proper film thickness for cementation, though. You got to be careful with that. Not all composites are designed for cementation purposes after warming. They are not. Be careful. Be careful. You need to control the temperature, but you also need to use a composite that has been designed for that specific procedure. All right? Here's the thing, right? When you look at these trends, these trends are interesting, and they will help, to maybe be able to do certain things in a much more user-friendly way, giving possibilities to the clinician. Simplified Vita universal composites, like Quantium, for example, are going to help tackle all clinical cases. Having a simplified Vita universal composite that just covers the most popular shades that you use in your office regularly is going to help you. Hey, I got options to solve most of my cases. I got a strong material that will definitely help me in the posterior, a very polishable material that will help me find or achieve aesthetics, the material doesn't stick to my instrument. It's pliable enough so I can put it in thin layers, spreadable enough. So these are the things that you should be looking for. Here are the takeaways. Regarding universal trends, composites can be used in the anterior and the posterior, regardless of, their nomenclature. Regarding the Vita trend, simplified Vita options will provide more options, to tackle more clinical cases. And regarding your warming, the warming trend, warming will help in the flowability, okay, in order to achieve better adaptation in deep boxes. Let's review this beer. Pills by Hopewell Brewery. What do I think about this beer? Listen, I don't feel this beer as a Pilsner. I have had my share of Pilsners in my life. The most popular beer in Venezuela, which is where I come from, is a Pilsner. It's called Polar. I've had a lot of those. And this doesn't taste like that, for sure. This is actually pretty darn good. Did it match the brewery description? Yes, to the T, because they were talking about hops and a little bit of, a little bit of bite and bitterness, and then a clean and crisp finish. This is, yes, very, very good. And again, they talk about bready malt with floral zip of classic German noble hops. It is hoppy, not a little bit. It is hoppy, but not hoppy enough to be overwhelming. It is yeasty. It is a little bit malty. It is clean. I really, really like it. So what am I going to give this one? Hey, man, I'm going to give it a solid 4. When I give it a 4, it means you should try it. It means you should try it. If you have a chance to try Pils from Hopewell, you should. Okay? Would I drink it again? Oh, my dear Lord, of course I would. Hey, before we go through the Q&A section, Quantum is out. Quantum is our composite. We spent 9 years developing this product. We are very proud of it. If any of you guys would like a sample, you can go to bisco.com, and from there you can, request a free sample if you are in the United States of America. Unfortunately, for international, the sample program is going to be, part of the distributor strategy. But if you are in the U.S. and you would like to try this composite, there is a way for you to get a free sample. So, question number 1 from Dr. Donald Griffin. How do universal composites with bulk fill composites compare to traditional layering techniques? Bulk fill is a technique. It's not a composite. Bulk fill means filling the whole preparation at once with one material. That is what bulk fill is. Certain bulk fills, you can only go to a certain level based upon the thickness of the layer that the product is indicated for, and then you have to finish it off with a layer of other product, which is fine. But you're doing most of the layering, you're doing it with a single placement of material. How do they compare? Well, bulk fill composites tend to be gray. And the reason for that is because you have to put them in such a thick layer that they become grayish, right?
Sip, sip, sip.
They're not necessarily super aesthetic. And I am not a big fan of bulk fill composites. How does it compare to traditional layering? Well, traditional layering, you have to put a layer of 2 millimeters at most. With bulk fill composites, you can just put a thick layer and you're good to go. Thicker than 2 millimeters for sure. It's a matter of preference, okay? If I say I'm not a big fan, that doesn't mean that it's a bad product. It just means that I'm not a big fan. Second question from Dr. Tamara Flores. What are the clinical advantages and potential drawbacks of using warm dental composites in terms of handling?
Sip, 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 sip.
Clinical advantages. Better adaptation for sure. Better adaptation for sure. You're going to have a flowable composite. You're going to have a more flowable experience of a very strong composites because lowering the viscosity through the heat that you apply to the material is going to provide, like I said, a more flowable experience, especially in that, interproximal box. What are the drawbacks? Well, you got to work a little fast because these composites, their cooling rate is quick. It's not minutes, it's seconds. So you got to work fast, And when it comes to handling, you're going to feel that the warm composite is softer. It could be stickier. It could be because, it's more flowable. You got to be careful with that. but as it cools off, it goes back to the original consistency that you are more accustomed to because you place it, most likely, most of the time you're placing it not being warmed. But you got to work fast if you want to be able to take advantage of that flow ability in order to increase marginal adaptation. Okay? Well, thank you, Dr. Flores, for your question. Question number 3, final question. Jamil Poole. If your microphone could spill some secrets after every episode, what's the one thing you'd unplug it to keep it quiet about? This is funny. I don't need to unplug my microphone. I have a production team. I have an editor that cuts off every single thing that needs to be bleeped. Okay? It's crazy. When I see the episodes, I ask myself, whatever happened to this? Whatever happened to that comment? That other comment that was, mildly inappropriate. Well, apparently there is the threshold and the level of acceptance of what I say is almost zero. So Jeremy has an axe the size of Wisconsin where he's chopping parts of this podcast. I don't need the microphone to go off. All I need is to finish the episode, and Jeremy, the producer, will take care of it. But it is what it is. My cheers to Jeremy. My cheers to the team who's behind this Bonding and Beer podcast. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Rolando Nunez. I am pilsing away today, and we'll see you next episode. Let's freaking go. Well, we're going to do this beer review. I like this. Jeremy, the producer, as always, did a great job of picking this beer. Where'd you get this one from?
That was from my sister. She dropped it off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's one hell of a sister.
Yeah, she's a good one.
Yeah, she's a keeper. Let's go, Jeremy.